You ever look at your life and think, yeah, I'm doing all right? That was me. 42 years old, living in a nice house in the suburbs, got a decent job managing a logistics company, and, most importantly, I had my family. My wife, Lauren, smart, beautiful, and just the right mix of stubborn and sweet. And our 4 kids, Ethan, Grace, Noah, and little Lily. They were my world. My reason for waking up at 5 a.m. every day and dragging myself to a job I didn't love but tolerated. Because that's what being a man is, right? Sacrifice. I wasn't the guy chasing fancy cars or luxury vacations. Nope. I was chasing something better, peace, stability. I wanted my kids to have the kind of life I never did growing up. My father, Richard, wasn't exactly father of the year. Strict, cold, always made you feel like you had to earn his love. I swore I'd be different. I'd be the kind of dad who went to soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, and bedtime story sessions. I wasn't perfect, but I gave my best. Now, Lauren? Man, I loved that woman. We'd been together for 18 years. She had this way of making everything seem lighter, like no matter how heavy the world got, she could lift it just by smiling at me. We weren't without our rough patches, sure, but that's marriage. You push through. You don't give up on each other. At least that's what I thought. Lately, though, something had shifted. Nothing dramatic, just little things. She'd spend more time in the bathroom than usual, her phone always face down on the counter. I'd ask, "Everything good, babe?" And she'd give me that tight-lipped smile, the one that says, "Don't dig too deep." We've been married long enough for me to know when she's holding something back. I'd brush it off, thinking maybe it's stress, maybe work's getting to her. People have their off days, right? But then there was that one night. It was late. The kids were asleep, and I was on the couch, flipping through channels, too tired to actually watch anything. Lauren sat on the other end, scrolling on her phone. I glanced at her and caught her staring at me, not in a loving way. It was a look I didn't recognize. Not anger, not sadness. Something darker. "You good?" I asked, muting the TV. She blinked like she'd been caught stealing and smiled, that same tight-lipped smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" I pressed. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Nothing you'd understand." I laughed it off, but that line stayed with me. Nothing I'd understand? What was that supposed to mean? I shrugged it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. When you love someone for almost 2 decades, you trust them. You have to, or everything crumbles. But sometimes, trust blinds you. The next morning, everything was back to normal. Breakfast with the kids, Ethan cracking jokes that weren't even funny but had Grace and Noah laughing like it was a comedy special. Lily spilled orange juice on her uniform, and Lauren rushed to wipe it up, all smiles and calm. Just another ordinary morning. If you'd asked me then, I would have said life was perfect. I had a family most people dream of. I had everything I ever wanted. But perfection is a funny thing. It's fragile. One crack, and the whole thing shatters. And my crack was coming. I just didn't know it yet. One normal Saturday evening. Nothing special. Kids were upstairs, probably arguing over the TV remote. The smell of spaghetti and garlic bread still hung in the air. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, just thinking about how peaceful everything felt. I swear, if you'd told me 10 minutes later my whole life would flip upside down, I would have laughed in your face. Lauren walked in, quiet like a shadow. Didn't even say my name. No "hey babe," no kiss on the cheek. Just silence. I glanced up and saw her leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed, eyes locked on me like she was sizing me up. "You good?" I asked, tossing the rag over my shoulder. She nodded, but her lips were pressed so tight it looked like she was holding her breath. That's when I knew something was off. Lauren didn't hide her emotions well. If she was mad, you'd know it. If she was sad, you'd definitely know it. But this was something else. "What's wrong?" I said, leaning on the counter, arms folded, eyes on hers. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an escape route. Then she took this deep breath, the kind you take before jumping into freezing cold water. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice was low, shaky. "Okay," I said slowly, heart already pounding for no reason. "What is it?" Another pause. Longer this time. She stared at the kitchen floor like it was more interesting than anything I had to say. Then she looked up at me, and I swear I'll never forget the look in her eyes. Guilt, shame, fear, all rolled into one. "James," she swallowed, her voice cracking like a busted radio. "You're not the father of our 4 children." I laughed, not because it was funny. No, it was one of those laughs you do when you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. I blinked at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. That any second she'd burst out laughing and say, "Gotcha." But she didn't. Her eyes didn't budge. Her face didn't change. I felt my whole body turn cold, like someone had opened a freezer door inside me. My heart started beating slow but heavy, each thud echoing in my ears. I could hear the kids upstairs, laughing like it was the best day of their lives. They had no idea. I had no idea. I shook my head, still half smiling, trying to cling to normalcy. "All right, Lauren, stop playing. That's not funny." "I'm not joking," she said, her voice so quiet I barely heard it. My smile vanished. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice low and sharp like broken glass. "You're not their father," she said again, louder this time. Her eyes flicked to the kitchen window like she was trying to avoid looking at me. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Not 1, not 2, but 4 kids? All 4? No way. There's no way that's true. I was there for every ultrasound, every labor, every sleepless night. I held them. I fed them. I named them. You don't do that for kids that aren't yours. What are you talking about, Lauren? My voice was rising now. I wasn't trying to be loud, but I couldn't help it. She started crying, hands covering her face like that was going to hide her from me. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled up to her chest like a little kid in timeout. I walked over slowly, trying to keep myself from blowing up. "Lauren, look at me." She didn't move. "Look, address me," I said louder this time. She finally raised her head, her face streaked with tears. "Who's the father, Lauren?" I asked, leaning down so we were eye to eye. Her lips moved, but no words came out. I could see her struggling, like she knew once she said it. There was no taking it back. I was holding my breath, every muscle in my body tense like I was bracing for a car crash. She whispered it, but I heard every syllable clear as day. "Your father, James." Silence. The world stopped. My ears started ringing so loud I thought I'd gone deaf. I backed away slowly, bumping into the counter behind me. I didn't feel it. My whole body went numb. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, except I knew I was awake. I looked at her, blinking slowly, like I'd misheard her. "Say that again." She shook her head, tears pouring down her face. "I'm sorry, James, I didn't—" "Say it again, Lauren," I yelled, slamming my fist on the counter so hard the plates rattled. Her eyes jumped up, wide with fear. Her lip quivered, and she said it like she'd been forced to. "Your father is their biological father." I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been seconds. Could have been hours. All I know is that my heart stopped. I'm not even sure how I was still breathing. I just remember staring at her like she was a stranger in my house. Like the woman I'd loved, protected, and sacrificed for was a whole different person wearing my wife's face. And my father? My own father? He'd held those kids, bounced them on his knee, called them grandkids with pride, And the whole time, he knew. He knew. I felt something break inside me. Not like a snap. More like a slow, painful tear. You ever hear fabric ripping? That was my heart. I felt it unravel, thread by thread, until there was nothing left. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared at her, trying to figure out who she really was. Because she sure as hell wasn't my wife. You did this, I said, my voice hollow. You ruined everything. She reached out like she was going to touch me, like she was going to comfort me. Don't, I growled, stepping back like she was poison. Don't you touch me. Her face crumpled and she started sobbing harder, but I didn't care, not anymore. I walked to the living room, grabbed my keys and headed for the front door. She called after me, begging me to stay, telling me it wasn't like that she loved me, that we could fix it. Fix it? Fix it. You don't fix something after you blow it to pieces. I got in my car and just sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My breathing was ragged, chest rising and falling like I'd just run a marathon. My vision was blurry, not from tears but from pure, unfiltered rage. I glanced up at the house, at the woman I loved standing by the window, crying. She looked broken. Good, because now I was broken too. Her words wouldn't stop replaying in my head. You're not the father of our 4 children. Your father is their biological father. My father. My father. I didn't know how long I sat there, but every second felt like a lifetime. The rage was building slow, like a fire creeping through dry grass. But it wasn't the loud kind of rage. It was silent. Heavy. Like a storm cloud, so full of thunder it can't even make a sound. I wasn't just angry at her. No, that would have been too simple. I was angry at me. Angry for being blind, for not seeing it, for thinking I had the perfect family. How many times did I bring that man into my home? How many times did I let him babysit, sit at my dinner table, and laugh with my kids like everything was normal? I shook my head, gripping the wheel tighter. Stupid. You're so stupid, James. And then the memories started hitting me one by one. Like that one time Ethan was born. I was standing in the delivery room, holding Lauren's hand while she screamed like her whole body was on fire. I remember looking at that baby, thinking, he looks just like my dad. People even joked about it. He's got his grandpa's nose, they'd say. I laughed, thought it was cute. Idiot. Or that one Christmas, Dad bought the kids new bikes. Not just one, but bikes for all 4 of them. I remember telling him, "That's too much, Dad. You don't have to do that." And he just smiled and said, "They're worth it." I thought he was being a doting grandpa. Turns out he wasn't spoiling his grandkids. He was spoiling his kids. I slammed my fist against the dashboard, hard enough to make the whole car shake. I leaned forward, head pressed against the steering wheel, breathing like I'd just run 10 miles. He knew the whole time. And Lauren? She'd been lying to my face for years, waking up next to me every morning, kissing me goodbye before work, calling me baby like everything was good. All while carrying his kids under my roof. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was Lauren. Her name flashed on the screen like it had a heartbeat. I stared at it for a long time, letting it buzz and buzz until it stopped. I'm not ready to hear her voice. I sat there for another 20 minutes, just thinking. About her, about him, about my kids. Are they even mine anymore? My heart twisted at that thought, and for the first time, I felt the tears come. Not big, heaving sobs, but that silent kind of cry where your face stays still, but your eyes leak anyway. I wasn't going to fall apart, not for them. I wiped my face and stared at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face hard like stone. I didn't even recognize myself. This wasn't me. The James I knew was calm, logical, patient, but that James was gone. I took a deep breath and started the car. I didn't know where I was driving, but I knew where I'd end up. His house. The ride there was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't even turn on the radio. Just me and my thoughts, battling it out in my head. I kept seeing his face, that smug grin he'd always have when he gave me fatherly advice. It's funny how hindsight works. Suddenly, I realized that every bit of advice he'd ever given me was designed to make me feel less than him. A man should always be present for his family, James. A real man takes care of his home first. Don't let your woman feel neglected, or someone else will step in. Yeah, you knew all about that, didn't you, Dad? My jaw was clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. I pulled up to his house and just sat there for a moment, engine running, hands on the wheel. His lights were on. He was home. I should have left. I should have driven away and cooled off. But that rage, that deep, burning rage, it wouldn't let me leave. It told me, go in there, face him, look him in the eyes. So I did. I didn't knock. I used the spare key he gave me years ago, like a fool. Walked right in. The smell of coffee hit me first. He was sitting in his recliner, flipping through a newspaper like it was just another day. When he saw me, his face didn't even change. Hey, son, he said, folding the paper on his lap. What's going on? Don't call me that. My voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor under it. He raised an eyebrow, leaning forward in his chair. Something on your mind, James? I took slow, measured steps toward him. You're damn right something's on my mind. He tilted his head, still playing dumb. What's got you so worked up? I stared at him for a second, letting him soak in the silence. I wanted to see if he'd crack first. He didn't. You know what Lauren told me tonight? I asked, my eyes locked on him. He didn't answer, but I saw it. That flicker of recognition in his eyes. It was small, but I caught it. That's all I needed. She told me the kids aren't mine, I said, taking another step forward. She told me they're yours. His face changed then. Not fear, not shame, just stillness. He leaned back in the recliner and sighed like he'd been holding it in for years. Then, of all things, he smiled. I figured she'd tell you one day, he said, rubbing his hands together slowly. I always told her honesty would catch up with her. My breath hitched. He knew. He knew it was coming, and he just sat there, waiting for it. You ruined me, I said, my voice cracking. You ruined everything I built. Don't be so dramatic, he said, waving me off like I was a child. Your marriage was on the rocks. I did what I had to do. What you had to do. My voice was rising now, that thunder I'd been holding in finally starting to rumble. You had to sleep with my wife? You had to father my kids? He stood up slowly, like he had all the time in the world. I thought he'd be afraid. I thought he'd beg. But no. He walked right up to me, face to face, and said, If you'd been a better husband, none of this would have happened. I swear I don't remember what happened next. All I know is my hand was around his throat, and I was pushing him back against the wall so hard it shook. His eyes bulged, hands clawing at my wrist, but I didn't care, not in that moment. Say it again, I hissed, squeezing harder. Say it again, old man. He choked out a laugh, his face turning red. He wheezed out, You'll never be like me, James. I let him go. He coughed, gasping for air like a fish on land. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel anything at all. You're right, I said, turning to leave. I'll never be like you. I walked out that door and never looked back. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them win. Not him. Not Lauren. Not anyone. I don't know what's worse. Finding out your wife betrayed you or realizing she did it with the one man you've spent your whole life trying not to be. My father. The man I swore I'd never become. the man I tried to outdo in every possible way. Turns out, while I was busy being the better man, he was busy building a family right under my nose. Every time I looked at my children, I felt it. This creeping doubt, this ache in my chest that wouldn't let me breathe right. I had to know for sure. That's when I made the call. Private laboratory DNA test kits. I ordered them online, had them delivered to my work, not the house. I swabbed the kids myself, told them it was for a school science project. They believed me. Kids trust their father. Funny how that works. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I opened them at work, not at home. I needed to be alone. I already knew what they'd say, but seeing it on paper still hit me like a sledgehammer. Probability of paternity: 0%. For all 4 kids. 0. I sat there staring at that paper, reading those words like they were in a foreign language. Ethan, Grace, Noah, Lily, not mine, not mine, not mine, not mine. I folded the paper neatly, slid it into a folder, and locked it in my desk drawer. No tears, no anger, just cold, clear purpose. "James, can we talk?" she asked one night after dinner, her voice soft like she was trying not to wake a sleeping dog. I didn't even look up from my plate. "About what?" She hesitated, biting her lip like she was holding something back. I feel like you're distant lately." I let out a short laugh. "You feel that, huh?" I looked her dead in the eyes, not smiling, not frowning. Just looking. "James, come on," she said, voice cracking. "We can work through this." "Work through it?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "You think this is something we work through?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked away, ashamed. Good. She should be. "You did this," I said, voice sharp and cold as a blade. "You, not me." "James, please." "Don't," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. "Don't you dare beg me. You made your choices. Now you live with them." I stood up, grabbed my plate, and dumped it in the sink. I didn't look back as I walked out. Her sobs echoed behind me, but I didn't care. Not anymore. People think revenge is all about losing control, about going wild and doing something stupid. But real revenge? The kind that sticks? It's quiet, patient, precise. I didn't want to hurt Lauren. No, that would have been too easy. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to feel every ounce of the pain she'd poured into me. Slowly, bit by bit, like water dripping on stone until it cracks. The best part? She didn't see it coming. Not at first. She still thought she had me. She still thought love was enough to patch up the hole she ripped in my chest. But I wasn't the same man she married. He was gone. First, I made sure she had no escape plan. I'm talking no money, no options, no safety net. We had a joint bank account, emphasis on had. I started moving money slowly, pulling a couple hundred here, 1,000 there. Nothing that would trigger a bank alert. I opened a new account under my name alone and slid it all over. I even left just enough in the joint account to keep her from noticing. People only check when it's empty. Credit cards? Canceled. Bills? I redirected them to my name only. She couldn't pay for water or electricity without me. The funny part? She didn't notice. She was too busy scrolling on her phone, living in her own little world. But when she finally did notice, oh, it was glorious. "James," she shouted from the kitchen one afternoon, "did you cancel the credit card?" I walked in slowly, towel in hand, drying a dish like I had all the time in the world. "Credit card?" I asked, tilting my head. "What are you talking about?" "I just tried to pay for groceries and the card declined," she said, her eyes narrowing at me. I raised an eyebrow, pretending to be confused. "That's weird. Maybe it's fraud. You should call them." And she did. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her pace the kitchen with the phone pressed to her ear, her face turning redder by the second. When she hung up, she stared at me like I was the problem. They said it was closed. Closed, James. Why would they close it? I shrugged, wiping the counter. Beats me. Maybe you should ask them. She stormed off, muttering under her breath, but I didn't follow her. Why would I? I'd already won that round. I served her the divorce papers on a Tuesday, right in front of the kids. I made sure they were all sitting at the table for dinner. Spaghetti, her favorite meal to cook. I walked in, placed the envelope on the table, and said, "We're done, Lauren." Her smile froze. "What?" she said, like she didn't hear me. I said we're done. There's the paperwork. I nodded at the envelope. You'll want to sign it sooner rather than later. Her eyes darted to the kids, who were frozen in place. She stood slowly, like she'd just been hit in the gut. You're serious? I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table, my eyes locked on hers. Serious as I've ever been. Her eyes filled with tears. You can't do this. You don't mean it. I tilted my head. You mean like how you didn't mean to sleep with my father and have his kids? Her breath hitched. The kids' eyes widened, looking at her like she was a stranger. Dad? Ethan asked. What does he mean? I didn't say a word, just stared at her. Let her try to explain it. Let her drown in it. She crumbled right there, fell to her knees, crying so hard she couldn't speak. The kids just stared, confused, scared. But me? I felt nothing.